I was thinking of taking the old soft top for a spin the other day, you know, in one of these 15-minute cities. I thought that would be a bit of a hoot, really, because, well, it's a filthy old thing. It's a bit old-fashioned, so there's lots of that lovely blue petrol smoke that will be spurting out of the exhaust, causing all sorts of chaos, especially with those climate change people who will be going, oh no, look at the CO2 that's coming into the atmosphere. That's why these 15-minute lockdown cities have been devised. Yes, well, we don't want to get and upset them, do we? No. But actually, it's interesting because I was contacted by a chap called Colin in Sunderland who said, here's a conundrum, Richard. I wonder if you've thought about this, or indeed your viewers, or indeed the council who are trying to implement this. And so I've taken on the challenge to try and explain the conundrum to you to see if whether you understand it and if I've got it right. So here you are, you've got a car and you're driving along and you go through these zones in these 15-minute lockdown cities, which are restricting you to these journeys. And suddenly there's the infringement letter that comes on your mat. Well, does it? That's the first thing. Does it come on your mat, or does it go to the registered keeper of the car? Because they could be two different people, of course. For example, if you were a disabled person who couldn't drive, but you had a chauffeur, then you aren't the one who's doing the driving. You just have the car registered to you. So who's done the infringement? Is it the chauffeur or the person who is the keeper of the car? And if you look on your logbook, I think it's a C5 document, they call it, it does say that being a keeper doesn't actually mean you are necessarily the owner of the car. By the way, children could own a car, a blind person could own a car, all sorts of people could own the car and be the registered keeper, because you don't have to put your date of birth on, I understand. So a child of 5, 2, a baby could own the car or be the registered keeper. It's really just an administrative address, so that the number plate on the front of the car has an address and the address is lodged with someone. So that if you go through these infringement areas and you log up more than you should, the fine will go to the keeper, because that's the only place the council can contact. But that's not necessarily the driver, is it? Let's face it. If you're a company, you might have a fleet of cars. They're your cars, or they're the company's cars, and a company isn't necessarily a person, it may only be a director, and so the company would be the registered keeper of the car, except that the drivers, the reps on the roads, who may be going through these zones more times than you could possibly tell, are the ones who are doing the infringement. So if the company or the let's put the disabled person and his chauffeur is given the infringement notice and the fine, it's incredibly unfair, because they're not the ones doing the infringement. Ah, but Richard, you'd say it doesn't matter. The council will just go, well, you know, the car is in your name, it's registered to you, whether you're driving it or not, you're the one that's liable. You've got to go back to the driver and say, oi, you shouldn't be driving more times than the restriction said. You've got to collect the money from them, which makes it very unfair again. But what about in this situation? You are, let's say you're blind, you have a chauffeur. You can't drive the car, but you're the keeper of the car, because the chauffeur is not a member of your family, just somebody who comes in and helps you as and when. So what if you drive with the chauffeur, or you're driven with the chauffeur 59 times to Sainsbury's, let's say, or Tesco's, or to Marks and Sparks, wherever, it doesn't really matter. You do this over a number of times a year, because you've got a year in these things to do these 100 journeys, but you only do it 59. Now, let's say the chauffeur, who's got access to the car and is perfectly legal to drive the car, does a few extra journeys on the side. He goes, oh, actually, we left the shopping there. I'll just go and nip back and get it on my own. Or I'm going to go and see Elsie, my girlfriend, and I'll just whiz round there, nips in there. So in other words, the chauffeur using the same car, but not actually taking the blind keeper, who's then liable? Are you going to clock up the keeper's extra 41 journeys, because he's only done 59 before, remember? Or are you then starting the clock again with the chauffeur who's doing his own private journeys on this one car? It seems extremely messy. And unless you've got photo recognition cameras everywhere that can see through the glass, and perhaps any form of hat or glasses that you're wearing, how would you identify who it is who's driving? And here's another example. Let's say you're the elderly head of a family of 3 children, and let's say they're boy, girl, boy, for the sake of argument. And you've got one car. You spend a lot of money on this car, and you're going to go, right, okay, we don't want to pollute the atmosphere, so we're going to restrict ourselves to one car. There's 3 of us, we're going to share the car. Now, let's say that those drivers, they go off in a year and they've each gone over 100 times, or they've stayed within that. Let's say they've all done 99 times. But wait, that vehicle has suddenly done 397 journeys. Not the drivers who've done the journeys, but the car. The car is registered to the keeper, who's this elderly person who doesn't drive, who spent the money in it. He gets the fine. That seems very unfair. Which one of the 3 drivers is he going to say has made the journey? They've all done less than 99. So how about this then? So he thinks, I know the way to get round this is to buy 2 more cars. So he buys 2 more cars. They do their 99 miles within the year, but they've now got 3 cars altogether, adding 2 more cars worth of CO2, which is supposedly bad for the planet, to the system, which makes a laughing stock of what they're trying to do is to limit the amount of traffic who's supposed to be going through the Oxford or the Canterbury 15-minute cities. It seems completely unworkable and ridiculous. So I don't know what they're thinking about. The whole thing is a nonsense based on this absolute myth that CO2 is a thing. But even if you said it was a thing, it's totally unworkable. So there we go. I think I'll stick to my soft top and drive around with a big plume of blue smoke and cause as much havoc as I possibly can. I'll see you next time.